If your daughter grows up to blindly obey, she may not end up finding someone who it is good to follow their directions and who may take advantage of her.
Well, research has shown that girls will look for their father's pattern in the men that they will have close, intimate relationships with for the rest of their life.
Welcome to the Empowering Choices podcast. My name is Joshua.
I am Lucas.
I'm Eric.
Eric and Lucas are licensed professional counselors, and we are continuing our series on mistakes dads make with their teenage daughters.
Part 4.
Part 4.
Expecting blind obedience. That's a pretty, intense title there. Oh. It feels like this is kind of a riff off of our last segment, where the last one was like talking about treating her like she's a little girl, and this is kind of like, don't.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think this is kind of more pertaining to when she's growing up.
Yep.
And so, like yesterday, I had a young woman who was telling me that her experience with her parents was do as I say and just do it.
Yeah, that sounds certainly like a parenting approach.
Just you don't get to question me. Doesn't matter. Just do it.
Would that be the dictatorial parenting approach?
Kind of more that dictatorship.
Just do it.
Yeah. And she was saying how badly that worked for her.
Would that be Nike parenting?
Nike parenting. That's
just do it.
Just do it. Okay. Yeah, that would be Nike parenting.
I apologize. I realize you're not awake yet this morning. So.
Yeah. Well, that was good though. So, I mean, she said, I'm a person that asks questions, and hearing the answers actually really helps me be able to form my own thinking. Mm-hmm. And that's what this part is about, is that your daughter, your son, they're going to change. They're going to go from grade school into middle school years. They're going to go from middle school years into high school years. And all along the way, there are developmental changes that occur. In grade school, they take your values primarily. I've heard from parents who said their kids looked at them and said, "What do we believe on this?"
That's adorable.
And it's very appropriate for those ages. Mm-hmm. Now, when they get into middle school, they're going to begin to say, "What did we believe on this? And why?" And then when they get into high school, they're going to go, "Yeah, I don't know if I believe on this the same way as you guys."
Yup.
And here's the why. And it's not that you're losing your daughter, it's that she's growing up.
Your children become adults and not, they're just increasing their independence as they get older.
The more you help her flower out her own critical thinking, the safer actually she becomes in a world which, as she moves out into it, is going to be more than willing to influence her critical thinking in your absence.
I mean, I'm just going to pick a pretty abysmal example, but I was watching a guy talk about his experience in the pornography industry. He'd been an actor in the pornography industry, and the interviewer was asking, he was mentioning something about whenever there are female pornography actors, there's like almost always a guy in the corner who like brought them or whatever. And the interviewer was like, "How common is that?" And the guy who was in the industries goes, "It'd be a minority of women for whom that wasn't true. You know, people who cajoled or coerced or whatever, like expecting blind obedience, right? If your daughter grows up to blindly obey, she may not end up finding someone who it is good to follow their directions and who may take advantage of her." That's kind of a real kind of turbocharged, like horrific outcome, but that's what the pornography industry is full of.
Right.
And you certainly don't want that for anyone you know.
Well, research has shown that girls will look for their father's pattern in the men that they will have close, intimate relationships with for the rest of their life.
I always tell clients, you'll marry your parents.
And it's more they'll marry their dad.
Well, sure. Yeah. For women, their dad, and then for boys,
Yeah, well, boys, it's not the same though. For boys, they don't just marry their moms. There's differences there, but until a girl is able to really take that on and recognize how that happens, so that she can change that, that'll be a pattern that'll continue to happen.
You're saying that there's an instinctual instinct. Yes, that was repetitious. To find a guy like her dad, unless she's very aware and able to change it.
Yep.
And wants to change it.
Yep. And wants to change it.
Also, be a dad that you want to, like, the guy you want her to be with, be the guy you want her to be like. Those are not the right words, but I think I'm getting the message across.
Yeah, I think you get the message across.
Be like the guy that you want her to be with.
So one of the biggest ways that you can handle this type of a situation your daughters are going to get in is to shore up the relationship that you have with your daughter.
I think you could print that out and hang it on the wall in this studio.
Is it going to be easy to hear all the different things that she wants to tell you in her life? I think dads, when girls get to puberty, think that somehow girl talk is what we're going to be involved in, and that's not the case. She's going to want your perspective as a guy on the things that are happening in her life. Now, will there be some tears at different times? Yes. Can you learn or other strong emotions? Yes. Can you learn to be able to understand those as just emotions? It's like a storm that's coming through, and you just kind of wade out through it. You
have to batten down the hatches and get in the tornado basement.
Well, that depends. Is there a guy who's broken her heart? You might have to. And then when it's done, moms are going to have to batten down the hatches so dad doesn't go out looking for the guy.
Oh gosh, yeah, that's a separate conversation.
That's a separate thing. How to protect your daughters when her heart is broken by a boy.
Right, and how not to go to jail.
Right. Yeah, and so, being able to weather those pieces and be able to stand in there and give her some perspectives that she can look at and that she can kind of, I don't want to say visualize, but, kind of mull over in her mind, chew on, processing, understand, because there's a lot of women that I see in the counseling room, and they still are under the understanding that men and women have the exact same thinking patterns, and they just can't understand why guys can't, just understand reason. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. They understand their reason very well. And their thinking pattern is very different than yours. And your daughters need to understand that.
Absolutely. So, we are talking about, well, again, it's in the title, expecting blind obedience. Don't do that, because you'll stifle your kid, and you want them to grow up to gain their own ability to think. You want to nurture their own ability to think. And you have to be okay if they're not carbon copies of what you think.
Right.
Because they're going to have things that they don't agree with you about.
The hard part for a dad is when you see a child, boy or girl, that is very reflective of you, and you might want a mini-me, and that then excludes them from becoming their own person, and it excludes their siblings from a lot of the attention that they're going to get more from you than from the mini-me is going to get more attention than they are.
You said that's hard for dads? I think it's probably a trap to avoid.
Yes.
Probably easy to want to.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. It's going to be hard for dads to be able to resist that.
There we go, resist that, yeah. Yeah, because you don't want carbon copies. You don't want favorites among your kids.
All those things are bad. They may feel good, but they're not, and I've run into different people who their dads molded them into exactly the person they wanted them to be, including listed out exactly the career things they would do their entire life. They never got a choice.
Right. This would be where I'd be interested to hear how this kind of stuff plays out in different countries and different cultures, right? Because I think of this stereotype of people who live in the Asian countries where your family does you're just gonna do what the family tells you to do, and how that works. Is that good? Does that cause problems? Just because there is a cultural norm doesn't always mean it's a good one. Right. And I'm not saying it's inherently a bad one, but if you are from a culture that I don't know, the family expectations were a lot higher. We'd love to hear from you about how that went and if that was good or if that was bad. I suppose it's kind of similar to the idea of like arranged marriages too, right? Like you're gonna do what the family says, kind of thinking.
Kind of. I mean, we used to be a country, go 100 years back, where the occupation was more set upon you than it was you got to choose. How does it go? A variety of different ways, but in today's world. That seems to be very confining, and it seems to not be going very well for people, as because they're in a free society that at some point they get to pick for themselves, and now they're going, I never even wanted to be what I am up to this point, and now I need to redo everything, and so there's a lot of lost time there,
and if you blame your parents for it.
Yeah, I almost feel like another title for this episode could be like how to avoid having your daughter grow up to blindly follow whatever man or people are influencing her. My wife and I were watching.
That'd be way too many words, though, Josh.
True, that would be.
Punchier.
Well, we were watching a documentary about a young lady who ultimately ended up being murdered by her husband. But I just said,
boy, I thought my example was bad.
Yeah, and I said, why is it that I can so clearly see, like, she should have been questioning. She should have said, hey, this doesn't seem right. She should have been talking to her family. She should have found a way out. But so often you see women in these situations sometimes that just kind of put up with things. They're not questioning. So it seems to me like a big part of this is teaching your daughter to question things, to ask, is this right? To
think.
Yeah, to not just, and when you do as a parent say, you're going to do exactly what I say no matter what or why. And sometimes that is the way something has to be. But at the end of the day, if, I see how that can just then translate into someone who goes, okay, I'll just do whatever I'm told because that's the more peaceful thing here. And really you want to make them where they are thinking and able to ask questions and able to go, this doesn't seem right. I need to, get out of this.
When women kind of more stereotypically more commonly have more accommodating natures than men. So this would be a greater risk for them than it would be for a man, kind of like on average.
Right.
But yeah, like teach your kids to think.
Yeah.
Is what I hear you saying.
So accommodating due to the nature of being a woman, or accommodating due to the culture to which they are in and raised in?
I think women are statistically more accommodating than men across cultures, if I recall correctly.
I think let's put that down and really look at that and talk about that in a future podcast. Let's really
that'd be interesting.
Take some time with that. Because I think there are going to be some sub pieces that we're going to find to that. But at the same time, I think that would be the fairest way to be able to handle that. I know a lot of women that feel like prey in the world that they move out in every day.
Prey, as in the creatures that get eaten, kind of word.
Yes.
I heard that word. I'm like, wait. What
I know. I figured you would grab on that. And so, how this pertains to fathers with your daughters is your relationship can help them have an avenue to come back to. A safe haven, and so that, like the example that you're giving, Josh, in that movie that you saw, there, and again, this also comes back to understanding the differences between how men and women think. And there are subtleties that people or predators, or however we're going to put that, have been able to understand the female way of thinking. And they can get around the back doors,
right,
to where they're unseen in a woman's mind. And dads can be very helpful in helping to allow their daughters to understand that those back doors even exist.
And I feel like that's like a common thing, that you will have a dad or even or other family members who are like, hey, this guy you're bringing around, he's no good, but the girl can't see it. And she's like, no, this is... So what do you do when you say, hey, this person seems like they're not a big deal. And they say, well, Dad, you just don't understand. He's a great guy. You don't know him like I know him,
And they talk like they've been smoking for 20 years. Is that
true?
True.
They develop this raspy smoke. Yeah. But what do you do when that's what they
like that. They talk like they've been smoking for 20 years.
You're like, I knew it was a bad influence. You're smoking. Yeah.
Dads, if you have the already established time with your daughters to where you're doing things with them, or whether that's going on walks, whether that's going, dad-daughter date or a favorite activity, then you're building the right to be able to be heard within their life. You have the blood bond. Those men don't. You see. And so and as you're doing this in how you're treating them along the way, because I've heard lots of kids throughout my career say to adult staff in a variety of different occupations, you're not my parent. You don't have the right to tell me that. So these kids came from very abusive parents. So having been very abused by their natural parents, they're still understanding there's a right to be heard because you're my parent. If you as the parent, if you as the dad is putting that time in there, then when she's saying you don't understand, you can be able to take a sidestep and say, tell me more what I don't understand.
Yeah.
And then she can say the different things she wants to say. And then you can be able to put it out there in a way that because you have to know her, what helps her think best.
Right.
You can then put it out there and say, okay, well, a lot of times when you hear certain things like this from a guy, this is what this means. Now, in addition to you hearing it from me, I also want you to ask your mom. And in addition to you asking your mom, feel free to look up on Google. Go ahead and fact check some of the things that we're saying.
Well, that's teaching them to think.
That's teaching them to think. And then when they say these things, because I've had these conversations, and then I've had girls come back and say, everything you said he was going to say or what you said it meant, that's exactly what he admitted to.
Yeah.
And the reason they would come back and say that is because I put the time in whatever that avenue was. And so that's not going to be as much as what you as a natural father have of a listening ear. And if you're putting that time in along the way, you're buying the right to be able to have those moments where you can help her to reflectively think and hear some of these things. Because kids operate out of emotions, and once that love emotion comes in there, it's one of the things the guys their age or older is going to be counting on, that they can blind them by the love and or the compliments.
Yeah. If you love me, you'll
if he's the first one who ever gave her compliments about herself or her intelligence or her personality or strengths or her beauty. Hint, dads, give these compliments, then they're going to have a lot of impact.
Right. I also think it's kind of interesting. This is where, especially even if you have younger kids who aren't dating yet, but creating that culture of I'm an involved parent. I'm interested in your friends. I want to know your friends. I want to be around your friends. Seems like that could then better naturally translate into if a girl is interested in a guy, she may even be in her mind go, well, I want you to meet my dad.
Dad's got to check it out.
Yeah,
Parents got to check it out.
Exactly.
Because their opinion has been valuable to me and useful and helpful.
Right. Yeah. And if you never cared until all of a sudden, here's a guy to date, then that's not going to go good. But if the whole time that's always been the MO and people hung out at your house and you were with her friend, then that's going to be a lot more natural for her to feel like, hey, let's see what my dad thinks. And then you're going to have a lot more influence when you're like, well, I don't know about this one.
I remember when we were kids, my mom was that parent. My mom and my dad, they wanted to meet everybody that was going to be in our lives. And it definitely had an impact on my thinking because I had a certain friend, and he was very diabolical and devious, and will throw in there, just like me.
I was going to say, you're talking about yourself?
Right. No, he was a good thinker. And there were times where he's like, hey guys, we should do this, and then we should do this. And, even some of the guys that would look at me and go, yeah, good luck getting that by Erik's mom. And he's like, oh, I can do it. I can sway anybody. And I'm like, dude, you should just stop now. I mean, I'm not even saying that,
Yeah.
And she had gotten in there. She had gotten to know, my friends. She had gotten to know their parents. They had a network. They all had different religious and political beliefs, but the belief they had is we are raising kids and we should be connected. And so they kept things in that realm, and it became a impenetrable wall for certain things, and it was good.
Yeah.
There's certain things that need an impenetrable wall between them and your kids.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when I was in high school, it also gave my mom more credit in my mind that I could talk to her, about different things, or about different people. Because I had seen, she saw right through my friend, so obviously she's got some insight because he was pretty savvy and, other parents he had been able to get past, but not my mom.
Yeah. Yeah. My
maybe your mom was not high in the agreeableness trait.
What do you mean?
No, so I'm circling back to what I had said before about, so I found some papers that talk about women are statistically more agreeable than men.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there's actually I emailed you a link. Maybe you can put that in the description.
Yeah, we can look at that in the later. Well, she was Black Irish, so how are they unagreeable?
Well, and so like all the studies show that like there's a tendency towards these things, but obviously individuals differ. Right. You could have a woman that's less agreeable and a man who's more agreeable, and but I mean, it's like statistically in big blocks, right?
Yeah. No, she was very not agreeable. She was, It's funny because she grew up watching the show Leave It to Beaver.
Okay.
And she would tell my friend,
which was like a classic 50s, like perfect family type depiction.
Kind of a perfect,
if you haven't seen it.
Yeah.
Oh, you should see it though. Because she would say, my friend reminded her of one of the characters on Leave It to Beaver. And I was like, crap. Because I'd seen the reruns, and she goes, yep, he's just the perfect modern day image of Eddie Haskell, who was the very, very manipulative individual that was always going to get Mrs. Cleaver to do. Yeah. And he would always start it with, Mrs. Cleaver, you look so wonderful today. Guess what my friend would do? Mrs. Denton, you look so wonderful today.
Just open with almost exactly.
And she's like, I think she even called it a couple of times. She said, Eddie, it's just not going to work. You guys should play football.
And your friend was probably like, huh?
Yeah, he's not named Eddie.
Right,
he's like, why did she call me Eddie? I'm like, dude, watch Leave It to Beaver. I've been telling you this. It's the wrong approach.
Yeah. My big problem was my mom was a teacher at my school.
Oh, there's a dynamic.
And so literally I could be like, oh, I did this with so-and-so. She'd be like, so-and-so who? Well, their brother was doing, she knew everyone's everything that anyone had done or been in trouble. But at the same time, that actually probably really helped keep me on the straight and narrow because...
Would you have a tendency to have drifted off of the straight and narrow, Josh?
I don't know. Well, I was kind of,
I think all kids would.
Overly active, but yeah. So that was always an interesting thing, and I think she probably sometimes took it a little too far. But I will say that her insight of guiding that probably did save me from several problems because she could kind of be like, well, that may not be a good choice. Why don't you hang out with these people? And that probably saved me from some problems.
So there's our theme kind of on this podcast is teach your kids to think. Mm-hmm. But then there's also kind of the additional addendum of like, but then also give them guidance, right? It's like, as you're teaching them to think, you're not simply saying, bye, like go. It's like, no, you're teaching them to think within like guidance and advice but then also check up on what I say, particularly for like the teenage level, like, well, girl, to come back to our title.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you're also helping them to be able to explore what they think about certain things,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and you're the parents, so you're going to have some type of this is the way these things are going to be. That's just what we're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the places that have latitude. Here's the places we can work with.
Well, kids always need a appropriate level of power, an appropriate level of power based on their age. You know, when your kid's 2, you get to let them pick out what color socks they're going to wear. When they're a teenager, you broaden that out a little bit. But like, you know, they can't go like on a, you know, European road trip by themselves with their friends they met on the internet. But then they can make choices about like what sports they play, and you can discuss with them what college they want to go to.
Even things they might want to go do on a particular night, but you set the time to which they're going to be in.
Sure. Yeah. If it's legal and you're back by 10, like.
Right. And just to throw in there, most cities and towns have curfews for 18 and under. And we have laws for when you can get your license. And we have
when
laws
you can drive
for when you can drive and how you can do it. So what you're doing is you're helping them understand how to be within a civilized society that's based on laws and rules, and how to be able to find and use the power you have appropriately that's still left for you to decide.
You mean when you turn 18, you can't just do whatever you want?
No, that's the common thought.
We've had discussions in that regard. Yeah.
Yeah. It just, the officer seems to have different ones.
Them and the IRS.
And the judge, you know, so there are some conflicting ideas as to whether or not when you're 18, you can just do whatever you want.
Do whatever you want. Yeah. No.
All right. Well, if you enjoyed that, we'd really love to hear some comments or your thoughts.
In the comments.
Yeah, so definitely on whatever platform you're doing, leave something there. If you haven't listened to the other parts of this, we'd encourage you to go back and listen to the other parts of this series, and check out our website at empoweringchoices.community. We will see you on the next episode.
Bye-bye.